Loud. Okay. Thanks, Saya. That's such a good reminder. Okay. So as I was saying, you will always be frustrated by the fact that there's no single stable set of rules to follow, even when it comes to something like citation, which feels very mechanistic, very sort of regimented. You know, here's where you put the commas and the parentheses. Citation practices differ from discipline to discipline. They are culturally constructed practices. They're sort of, you know, they're always in flux, and they reflect values of the and basically mutual understandings of each writing community, each community of writers. And this is, you know, this is why when you move from discipline to discipline or from course to course, you might find that your professors have different expectations for how you are to cite and engage with sources. And instead of throwing up your hands and being like, just tell me the right way to do something, reframe that frustration positively and think, oh, they are giving me the down low on what happens in their community of practice, you know, like whatever discipline or disciplinary subject conversations that they participate in. This is probably the expectations that they are then sharing with you. Your professors will always think that what they do is what everyone else does and what you should know how to do. So they may not frame their set of rules as disciplinary specific and not the same for everybody. But you'll have studied writing professionally in my course, and so you'll know, okay, but this is just what they do in their specific context. And so there's a really good way of trying when you move into a new like writing community. So if you're taking a class in with a new prof, or if you're studying something that you haven't studied before, read your course readings with an eye to looking for, identifying, and potentially emulating the citation practices that you see in those readings. And that's what this worksheet that I've linked here will help you do. So, and then you can also use this worksheet to work on your own essays to make sure that you are engaging with sources effectively in those disciplinary contexts. So I'll leave that link with you to work through on your own. And I will sort of go through a process of explaining citation. So Haj, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Let me know. I'll go through a process of explaining what we're looking at when we're looking at citation, which will help you engage in this kind of citation analysis so that you can emulate these practices. Oh yeah, the Ukraine website is on the class. Go to the course website and click on evaluation assignments from the syllabus page and click on the website, and it's all there. There's a link to the example site. If someone can grab Sahaj that link and put it in the chat for them, I'd appreciate it. Great, wonderful. Okay. So let's look at this. So what is citation? Well, here's an example of citation that I have taken from a source. So I'm paraphrasing it, or actually I'm directly quoting it. And so I'm demonstrating what citation is, showing citation, and giving the definition in one go. So we have Giltro 2002 explains that citation is the attribution of one statement to another speaker. And you can see some of the specific formatting here that we're used to seeing in academic texts, and we'll go through that in a minute. What I don't want you to think is that academic writing is the only place in which we cite sources or what other people have said. We do this all the time in our everyday speech. And the more you become familiar with the way that you do that in your everyday speech, the more you can think about transferring those skills to your academic writing practices, right? So here we have an example of an everyday conversation. Did you hear what Bob said? What did he say now? He's suing Chipotle, right? This is an example of an everyday conversation. One person is telling someone else what Bob said, that citation. In academic writing, that kind of citation is highly stylized, and it's got a bunch of rules around how to do it. Again, these rules shift. So what you see in my presentation for the most part is APA. Oh yeah, Bobby, absolutely. Absolutely. People will call you out on social media if you're not clear about where you've gotten something from, especially if they know the source or if they are the original source. Okay, so we see here these conventions of academic citation. So what are those conventions? What are they called? Oh, we'll get to this, I think. Okay, maybe we'll get to it in a minute. Okay, I'm just gonna go with the flow and trust my process. So one of the things that students do a lot is they refer to sources as books or articles and forget that they're actually people, like authors, who have written those things. And this can cause problems with the way that you engage with sources. It can sort of identify you as a novice because you're not engaging with people. You're treating the sources as like the paper they're printed on. And I'll show you an example. So a lot of students think of sources as text, and they write things like, sorry that this is an image, so I can't get rid of this, but I'll type it in the chat what it says. In Alexander's 2005 study, it says that. So you can say, I don't know if you're familiar with writing this way. There's nothing technically wrong with in Alexander's study. It says that in terms of plagiarism, you've cited correctly, you're being accurate, you're demonstrating that something is coming from something else, you're providing all those details. It's, yeah, this stylistically, it's wordy, it's not grammatically correct, it's awkward, but more than that, it's not emulating the practices of the professional community, which is to talk to each other like people. So when I publish a paper and I'm referencing, say, Janet's work, I would treat Janet like a person, another colleague, right? So I would say in Milo Tice's 2005 study, she says that because Janet's a person. And so I can use those pronouns. Yes, you are a person. And in doing that, I'm positioning both Janet and I in a conversation together as colleagues, as professionals. If I were to say, in Alexander's 2005 study, it says that, I'm not positioning myself alongside that text as a colleague. So I'm sort of positioning myself outside of the scholarly conversation, which identifies me as an outsider rather than an insider. And this is just one of the ways that you can build your ethos, your credibility as a professional writer and an academic writer, is by treating your sources as people rather than as texts. It's one of those things that if you start doing this, your teachers will start thinking that you are a very mature, advanced writer. And it's one very simple and subtle switch. Okay. So there's two different ways that we talk about citation. We divide that between in-text citation. So when you're writing your essay or your article or whatever, you might say, use these, refer to sources in your sentences. And then the citation that appears in the reference list. And often when you're being taught how to cite, that reference list and its formatting gets focused on almost exclusively. And, it seems like, whether something is italicized or underlined or capitalized or whatever, it seems like those are like the most important things about citation, when really that's inconsequential. As long as you are sharing the full bibliographic and accurate bibliographic details of your sources, and we can very clearly see a connection between the in-text citation, see Alexander 2005, and the reference list entry for Alexander 2005, not getting the mechanism, like the punctuation of that reference list correct will be inconsequential to anything other than your professors maybe they like to be really fixated on that, and they'll take away a mark or something. But what's most important about citation is actually how you engage with sources in your text, because in the in-text citation, because the way that you do that will mark you as an insider or an outsider, will help you develop credibility and your ethos. It will help you align yourself with ideas or distance yourself from ideas. It'll allow you to respond to ideas and to identify when and where you are articulating your own positioning versus repeating someone else's. And all of that has to do with demonstrating to your professors in school that you understand what you're writing, what you're reading, and you are putting intellectual work into thinking about where you stand in relation. And that's everything that writing for grading is asking of you. Yeah, so as Bobby's saying, you can use different kind of automated citation generators to get the punctuation and stuff right down here. But you really can't use automated writing to learn how to engage in a sophisticated way that is reflective of the disciplinary practices in the in-text. That's why we read other people's writing and we look at how they're citing and how they're engaging, and then we try to emulate it. So when you're looking at how something is cited, you want to look for different types of features. So with in-text citation, what we call integral citation, we're looking for things like signal phrases. Who here has heard of a signal phrase in relation to citation before? Maybe you can raise your hand and let me know. Only one of you? Okay, well, that's good. That's good to know. Oh, two. Okay, that's good to know. Signal phrase, thanks to, and I think it was Michael. Thank you. Signal phrases are very important to be able to both identify and emulate, because they do a lot of work for you in your in-text citation. So essentially, signal phrases signal the beginning of cited material or reported speech, as we sometimes refer to it. So here I've identified it and highlighted it in orange. Giltro, that's the name of the author, followed quickly by the date of the publication we're referring to, so her 2002 textbook, and then a speech act verb, which is a fancy word for the verb that describes what Giltro has offered and how she's offered it. So explains is our speech act verb. And then everything that follows is implied to be paraphrase or like a summary, and if there's quotation marks the way you're seeing here, direct quotation from that text. In APA, we keep the date next to and as close to the author's name as possible. And we put the page number always after a direct quote. So it looks like this in APA. In MLA, dates aren't as important. And if you're interested in why, I can elaborate. So just let me know in the chat. Oh, Shelby's interested in why. Okay, so in MLA, Modern Languages Association Citation Style, right? MLA, you are, that system was designed for people who are looking at languages and studying literature. And when you are writing an English essay, you're doing close readings of texts, and the citation that you're doing is by and large close, reflective of that close reading. So you might say something like, Milo Tice described the sky as hazy and sad. And so we would want to look very closely at that description, that word choice of hazy and sad. And so MLA allows us to focus on close reading, which the date of her book isn't really relevant in that case. But direct quotation is common. And so MLA doesn't ask for the date. It asks for first name followed by last name in your text. And it always requires a specific page number. And if there's no page number available, then a paragraph number or something that will allow your reader to go and search for that citation or that text and find the direct quote very quickly. Does that make sense? This is how MLA has been designed to reflect what it's modeled to basically allow or enable, right? That kind of very close reading of literature. APA is the, as Bobby said, American Psychological Association, and it was designed for social science research. Social science research does not engage in as much close reading, although it does sometimes, but it does a lot more than that and is often addressing context, issues of context, maybe historical context or social context, much, almost as often or more often than things like direct quotation. And so APA is interested in the date. How relevant is this context? How up to date are your sources? And that's why the dates are important enough to put in the body of your essay. Also, APA allows you to summarize or to provide brief summaries of your text without putting a page number. So you can say something like Milo Tice's study on the sky and how it feels, I don't know, is good, whatever. You don't have to put a page number for that. In APA, you would be forced to kind of find a page number that, on which a summary of the entire text is provided. And so APA allows us to talk kind of with broad strokes about different kinds of texts. It does require a page number whenever you drill down and provide a direct quotation. And it recommends page numbers whenever possible or relevant. So that's the major difference between APA and MLA. Chicago style is also, it's commonly used in humanities disciplines that engage in more research-based writing, so religion and history, where dates are also important. And so it feels a lot more like APA than MLA. Chicago style notes, the notes style allows for extended footnoting, which if you've ever tried to read a history article, you'll note that the footnotes, those explanatory notes, can be just as long as the essay itself. And so that's why Chicago is preferential there. Essentially, all I'm trying to say to you is that there is a reason, broadly, usually, why different disciplines have these affinities for the different kinds of citation styles. They're not completely arbitrary, although in some cases they, like for instance, when academic journals just come up with their own in-house style, usually that's to accommodate an editor's preference or to brand a journal so that every publication from that journal looks a little bit different from any other publication. And in those senses, they're kind of arbitrary. Is that clear? Oh, good. I'm glad, Shelby. It's, thanks for letting me nerd out. It's definitely kind of a niche fixation here. Oh, good. I'm glad it's interesting. So now yeah, when you're just given a choice and it doesn't matter to you, think about, well, are dates important? Then I should go with APA. Am I going to want to avoid having to direct or provide a page number when I talk about texts in broad strokes? Go for APA. Am I going to be doing a lot of close reading? Go for MLA. And then your life will be a little bit easier because the citation style will work with you rather than against you. Okay, let's get back to this. So speech act verbs are very important. They can allow you to do a lot. what would happen? So here we have explains as our speech act verb, right? Giltro explains. What does explains imply about how we feel about Giltro's, what Giltro has said? Can you guys say in the chat if you think it's like, it implies like that we like what she said or dislike, or maybe we're just neutral? What do you think? Like, dislike, or neutral? Yeah, so I would say neutral rather than objective. Yeah, neutral. I agree with you. So can you give me an example in the chat of maybe a more negative verb that we could use here instead of explains? Claims, yes. Giltro claims. Giltro suggests. Although suggest can be either or, it kind of depends on the context. Giltro asserts, which might be us describing like, you know, an aggressiveness in the way that this has been presented that maybe isn't legitimate, or that something that we can take issue with, right? Yeah, so speech act verbs allow us as authors to do a lot of critique and to, you know, sort of anticipate where we're going to go or what we're going to say about that reported speech. So they're very important. It's important for you to think about, you know, that verb that you're choosing. Do you want to agree with? Do you want to endorse? Do you want to critique or sort of foreshadow the fact that you're going to take a position in response? And choose a speech act verb that's helpful for doing those things. And on slide blah, blah, blah down here, slide 21, I have kind of an example of that spectrum. So I've got like claims and purports on the negative side of things, and says, describes, explains as kind of more neutral. Positive might be like demonstrates or illustrates, right? Also, if you have any kind of adverb, is it an adverb? If you say like effectively illustrates, obviously that's positive. So you can really emphasize positive or negative too by using an adverb. Okay, so let's talk about when you would choose to write with sources this way. So there's this difference between integral citation, which is what we've been looking at with the name and the signal phrase in your sentence, and parenthetical citation. This is when the material, the citation information is just in those brackets or parentheses at the end of your sentence. So here's an example of integral citation. Holmes and Watson, 2005, introduced a reliable AQ method for measuring animal intelligence. So integral citation with that signal phrase. Here's kind of the same material presented with parenthetical citation. In 2005, a reliable AQ method for measuring animal intelligence was developed. You can see here that the was developed obscures who developed it. And then the who developed it question is sort of answered in parentheses. Parentheses really, they shush kind of the information in them. They communicate to your reader that it's not important, right? Like when you're reading a textbook and there's a big, you know, something in parentheses, you probably skip over it with your eyes, or you go, yeah, whatever. And then you keep reading the real stuff that's not in parentheses. Does that map onto your experience of reading? Can you guys let me know in the chat if that makes sense to you, if you do that? Thanks, Michael, for letting me know. Yeah. Shelby, you attend to it. Juliet, you agree. Yeah. So I kind of like gloss over it. So yeah, exactly. It's like extra, Bobby. It's like, by the way, and you don't really have to read this, but if you're Shelby, you might you might find it interesting. And so what parenthetical citation does is it says, right, it says that the author's names aren't super important. What's important here is that this AQ method was developed and that it's reliable. Yeah, you're right, Nicole. It does say 2005 twice. Maybe I can ask my TAs if you would recommend excising one of those 2005s, if you would keep them both. and like maybe explain. What do you guys think? Are you guys?
For me, I would, it would depend how the context. So if it's really important for people to know it's in 2005, like Watson journal publications take a long time. So I might keep it because people actually don't know that the publication and the development happen at the same time. But if it's not actually that important, then I would take it out.
Yeah, it's actually, I made this example, thanks AJ, I made this example up completely, like there's no AQ method. Okay. um it's unlikely that 2000 this would have been developed in 2005 at the same time it was published. So AJ, you're definitely on to me here. It's more likely it would say something like in 2003 a reliable AQ method was developed, and then the publication would be 2005. But I think I would keep it. Thanks AJ and Janet for agreeing. Okay, so what's the difference? So both of these things are totally like fine when it comes to citing clearly. You're not going to run afoul of plagiarism by choosing one over the other. So how or on what basis would we choose? So remember this Speech Act thing, when we were taught, I was explaining that it allows you to sort of take a position and to evaluate. Whereas there isn't the same opportunity with parenthetical citation. So I think it's on that basis that you would want to make this decision. Sue, exactly. I was about to say this next. So Sue's offering in the chat how important the writer is, and if we want to comment with the writer's credentials. Yes, exactly. That's another reason why, or that's another way to decide between integral or parenthetical. If the author is important, especially if they're a big name, like, you know that your reader, your intended readers, your audience is going to think more highly of you because like Holmes and Watson, then you would want to name drop kind of about that. But also, if you put Holmes and Watson, especially if you include some of their bio, like professors at Stanford's I don't know, leading edge animal research lab. I just made that up. I don't know if Stanford has that. You would then want to integrate that, to kind of make your citation more important or more reliable. But certainly if you would like to have a conversation with the authors, you would want to use integral citation. You use their name, then suddenly you can actually talk with them. So in the next sentence, you could say they, or I disagree with them, or whatever. With parenthetical citation, it's much more difficult to engage in a conversation with the cited authors because they're not a part of your narrative. And the other thing that parenthetical citation does is it kind of makes the information you're presenting sound like you endorse it or you're presenting it as a fact. So if we just compare these two, we have for the integral citation, Holmes and Watson 2005 claimed that their AQ method for measuring animal intelligence is infallible. Obviously, we are raising some doubt here with this Speech Act verb claim that we can then take up. If we just say the AQ method for measuring animal intelligence is infallible, and then we leave the citation to parentheses, what we're actually conveying, whether we mean it or not, is certainty. We're endorsing that statement as fact. And then it becomes awkward to then say, but, or however, we must, because you haven't taken your reader's hand along with you for that ride. You tell them something with certainty, and then you're trying maybe in the next breath to take it back, and it becomes a very awkward thing. So in this case, if I didn't want to just present this with certainty, I would definitely use integral citation. The one thing that we're doing here that this demonstrates is proximity. So parenthetical citation here makes us very close to the material we're citing because it's coming out, like we are saying it and then we're like, by the way, it came from someone else. But we are the primary sort of voice for it in that sentence. With integral citation, which is happening over here, we're distancing ourselves from it because we're saying, hey, Holmes and Watson claim that this is true, which implies not me, and then allows you to go on and explain why not you. What do you think about it? So that proximity is created, and it has a lot to do with the construction of certainty and doubt. So if you want to distance yourself from idea, just attribute it to somebody else and then explain your position on it. So these kind of like, these slides review everything we just went over. We talked about speech act verbs and evaluation. Let's talk a little bit about synthesis. Or are there, sorry, I'm like moving through this. Does anyone have questions about using or deciding when to use integral citation and when to use parenthetical citation? Is anyone studying in the sciences here at all? Yeah, Michael, you're in Psych. So Psych is actually a sort of a useful discipline to make this next point. So in Psych has softer areas of research and then harder science areas of research, right? So it's kind of, Psych kind of is on this spectrum. So let's say you're in a soft area of research in psychology, where you're doing qualitative research, you're studying people, you're describing other people's narrative experiences of the world. You would very likely want to be using integral citation because you're putting ideas into other people's heads. Like these people are constructing these ideas. If you're in the harder social sciences, the ones that like to think of themselves as very scientific, maybe where you're engaged in rigorous research methods to produce results. If you're working in the biological or chemical sciences, same thing. You're very likely, for the most part, or maybe even only, going to be seeing parenthetical citation. Does anyone know why? I'm glad that's useful, Michael. Michael, do you have any notion of why that might be?
Well, if it's like hard sciences, there would probably be like something because they're like kind of well-established facts. Sorry about my dog, but
No
they're
problem.
kind of well-established facts. So like you kind of just cite it like very quickly, just as because you're increasing your proximity to it instead of like because the claims for softer sciences are like they're a little more harder to kind of objectively claim.
Yes, yeah. You're dancing all around it, and all of this, you're almost right there. Sue's getting us close too. So the research the research is more important than the writer. Yes. So you're right there. So in the harder sciences, Michael, you were using this term objective and like hard facts. The reason why these things become objectified or hardened as fact is because there's a clear acceptance in the harder science that method produces information, not author or human, right? And so what happens is, okay, let's say I'm a researcher and I'm like a biologist. I don't know, I go into the lab and I do some things. Obviously, I don't know what biologists do. I like grow some cells in a petri dish. I don't know. And then I write about it and then I share my results and I say, okay, going through these steps will show anybody who does that this consequence happens. We have this result. And so it's not me who produced that knowledge. It's the method that produce the knowledge. And if let's say, Monica, if you reproduce my study, you should find the same thing. And so it's not me, it's not Monica, it's the method that produces the information. And so the author's names aren't important. And the author's names then go in parentheses. So we would say the study, the 2005 study of animal intelligence produced this result. It's the study that produces the result. In the softer social sciences and in the humanities, there is an understanding that has emerged over the last, 30, 40 years, that that knowledge is socially constructed and people construct it. And so even if we're engaging in quantitative and qualitative research, we endorse always attributing authorship with the production of knowledge through things like integral citation, but also with the use of I and personal pronouns in writing. So in the sciences, you'll very likely be discouraged from saying I find, and instead have to say this study finds. That's because the method found it, not you. In humanities, in the social sciences, depending on your prof, you'll be encouraged to use I because, well, who else is saying it other than you? And it's important that you admit that you're saying it, because with that admission comes an understanding of your subjectivity and how your life experiences, your biases, all of that has informed your analysis and your interpretation. So you should debate that as a literature student. I mean, these are big debates. These are big matters of debate, right? So when I say in the sciences, it's the study that produced a thing, not a person, I don't actually, as a humanities, social sciences person, I don't actually believe that that's the case. But that's the sort of facade that is maintained by practices like using parenthetical citation and not using the personal pronoun. Oh, you're responding to Bobby. Okay, I'll ignore you guys in the chat. Okay, good talk, guys. Let's talk about synthesis. So very rarely in your papers, as you move up through the year levels, will you be working with just a single source. And instead, you'll be asked to work with multiple sources kind of in one breath. And you'll be having to do something called synthesis, where you're synthesizing all the material you've gotten from a number of different sources and writing about it. So here's an example of what synthesis could look like using both parenthetical and integral citation. So I'll read it out and maybe you can think about why we used integral citation where we did, okay? So it goes, the emotional intelligence of the animals we eat has long been a matter of debate with implications for animal protection laws. Some certainty is now possible with Holmes and Watson's AQ method for measuring the emotional intelligence of non-human animals. For instance, use of the AQ method to study pigs has led to widespread acceptance that pigs are remarkably intelligent, at least on par with the average human adolescent. Such findings are fueling the work of animal rights activists who are advocating for greater legal protections for farm animals and even personhood under the law. So this is an example of synthesis where we've taken how many sources are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 sources in a single paragraph. And we've used integral citation here with Holmes and Watson, parenthetical citation here with Alexander 2002, Enola 2013, this list, and Pippis 2020. What's going on? Why did we decide to use integral citation for the Holmes and Watson and not for the other things? Does anyone want to help us understand that? Any ideas there? Oh yeah, their method. So it's like really pointing out that it's their method. Yeah, the other sources aren't as influential. I think that's it, Bobby. The Holmes and Watson method is the foundation on which all of this other legal work is being done. And so that makes that method and that source very influential, very important. And so it's centered in this discussion using integral resource or citation. Yeah. Okay, what does this mean? C. Alexander 2002. What does that mean? Anyone? Yeah, Bobby, there you go. Bobby, it gives more history. So this statement, the emotional intelligence of animals we eat, has long been a matter of debate, with implications for animal protection laws. If we want to tap into that history, we should go and look at Alexander, who provides an accounting of that long history of that debate. That's what that means. No, it's not about emphasizing it. It's not about finger pointing. It's not necessarily the original source. It's like, do you want to see that long history? Alexander is the one who provides it. Oh, see is a recognized, like see is a conventional verb. You could clarify here, Sue, and say see an overview of this history in Alexander 2002. You could do that, but see kind of implies that the history is there. If what you're doing, Shelby, yeah, you could put it in a footnote. So especially if you're in history, this is why history uses these footnotes. You would put in a footnote like this history is illuminated by Alexander 2002, who writes, and you can give like a summary. But if you're writing in a discipline that is not as accommodating of footnotes, then you could just very quickly say C, or you could say C for this history, Alexander 2002. So this implies without page numbers that source is all about that history. But yeah, no, if you can provide, like, let's say it's Alexander from page 252 to 300, then put that in. Yeah, be as specific as you can. Okay, let's look at this listing of sources. And so MacArthur, McQueen, Lazarus, and Pippas. Why are these divided? Why didn't I put Pippas in this list? And why didn't I put them all at the end? Yeah, Michael, Pippas, even personhood under the law, the person who advocates for personhood is Pippas, 2020. Whereas the other ones, MacArthur, McQueen, and Lazarus, are only really referring to, they're the ones who are advocating for greater legal protections, but they don't make that personhood argument. So I've divided that out. Does that make sense to everyone? You want to put your citations, your parentheses, as close in proximity to the information that they're describing or pertinent to as possible. So they shouldn't always come at the end of your sentence. And then this, I want you to look closely at this sentence, this sort of list. MacArthur 2017, semicolon, McQueen 2018, semicolon, Lazarus 2020. This is 3 different sources that all refer to the same thing. They demonstrate the breadth of and depth of my research, or the author who's written this. And they show that this advocating for legal protections is being done by a number of different people, not just one person. And so it makes an argument that claim is well-founded. And it builds also your ethos as a writer, that you're aware of that. I do think that there's a problem with the APA style here. maybe AJ, Janet, Brenda, you guys can let me know. I always forget, do these go in chronological order in terms of dates, or do they go in alphabetical order? I think it might be alphabetical, and I've messed it up here.
Alphabetical.
Alphabetical. Okay, so I would, AJ, if they were my editor, would say put Lazarus first, and then MacArthur and McQueen. But as students, I don't think those technical details would matter too much. So when you're asked to engage with a number of different sources in a single go, there's a few strategies you can use to do that. So first, go and gather up your research, read, make notes, keep track of which notes go with which source. Guys, what's it called? The Student Learning Services offers note-taking workshops. So if you need support with that, am I right? Student Learning Services? If you need support with how to take notes, etc., you can seek those out. Anyways, once you have all your notes, then what you want to do is go back to kind of the questions that you're trying to answer, and maybe even come up with different highlighter colors, and go through all of your notes and highlight, so like anyone who talks about, for instance, advocating for greater legal protections for farm animals, you would highlight those in green, and then you would end up with a list of authors who all talk about that. Oh, thanks, Janet. So helpful. Janet's provided a link to learning skills services. Did I say that before? No, student skills. Okay, thank you. So you want to group cited authors based on similarities and differences between the issues they address, also their stances that they take, whether they agree or disagree with each other, the methods or approaches they use to examine. If that's important to you, like Michael, you definitely in psych want to take stock of who's using which kinds of methods, and their central conclusions or findings. Doing that work will allow, and also who's citing when and who's citing whom. Have they cited each other, and who wrote first? And then you can kind of create this map of cited authors around the points that you want to make, so that you can then create a text like this. This guy provides an overview of the history. These people provide a specific method that's the foundation, right? It comes before, look, 2005, and then all of these are after. It comes before, and it's the basis on which all of these other people have made their claims. All these people agree with each other and are doing the same kind of work. And this person agrees with them, but does something a little bit differently. So you can see that I've done this work of grouping and creating this map of my sources. And that's how you will end up with an effective and efficient summary of your sources. And so, this just underscores the extent to which all of your other academic skills, your academic critical reading, your note taking, your ability to see patterns across things, all of that will inform how effective you are at synthesis and citation and moving in and out of engaging with sources. So, think of what I'd really like to encourage you to do is to think of sourcing and citation, not just as the mechanics of formatting your works cited page or your references list, but rather as a matter of writing. And think about it as, part of the writing process, part of drafting and revising, part of planning and note taking, right? It's all wrapped up in citation, because citation isn't just about like, okay, I want to make sure that everybody knows I'm not plagiarizing. It's about creating a narrative that makes sense, showing that you understand the cohesion, like the progress of a field, the relationships between people, and all of that, plus doing it in the way that is recognized, that's done typically in your discipline or the discipline of your professor, will show your prof that you're knowledgeable, you're informed, you've done your work, and you're part of their community. And that will help you, reach up into those A's. Has anyone heard of or considered citing indirectly before? So this looks like this. So let's say I used your names for this. I just grabbed a bunch of names. Sorry. Thank you to Monica, Anna, and Timo for your names here. So let's say Timo's writing a paper and has read Anna's paper. Okay, so Timo's writing an essay and has read Anna's essay and wants to cite this quotation in Anna's paper. So Timo writes, Zhao says, the sky is blue, but Timo got that information from Anna's paper, not from Zhao's paper, right? So this is indirect citation. So Monica says the sky is blue. Anna cites that and publishes her paper. Timo reads Anna's paper, who says the sky is blue, right? And cites it this way. Shelby, why do you ask that question? Why would we not be allowed to indirectly cite? It's a great question. It could definitely be wrong, yes. Has anyone played that game of broken telephone at a party? Maybe sometime in the distant past before we all had to be 6 feet apart? Yes, Janet. So, Michael, you jerk. Yes. Okay. So exactly, guys, you're right on point. We can't trust Anna's reading skills. Or maybe Anna did a phenomenal job of saying what Monica said, but she took it out of context and used it for her own purposes. And we're reading it in Anna's context, and we don't have access to what Monica's intentions were. So we need to go back to, as Janet is recommending, we always need to go back to the original source and check it out, make sure it's accurate, read around the quotation, make sure we understand the author's point, what their purpose was, and then cite them directly. And this is the recommendation in the APA style guide, that you can do it, but it's recommended that you should read the original source. It's possible that Timo wants to make a comment about how Anna has cited Monica, in which case, he'd want to say, here, let me make this bigger. He'd want to say something like, Lopez 2022 reports that Zhao 2022 observes that the sky is blue. And then this page number, let's say it comes from page 54, would be referring back to the subject of the sentence, which is Lopez reports. Although very, very challenging. You maybe would want to clarify that. Oh, sorry, 2022 here. This is fine because what you're doing is you're taking issue with Lopez's report, and then you would want to probably say, however, sorry, Monica, Zhao 2022 did not intend for this observation to be taken out of context or whatever, okay? So there is a time and a place for indirect citation, and it's usually when you're taking issue with the way someone's engaged with someone else's text like this. Yeah, you get a lot of this he said, she said, about whom in our everyday drama, in pop culture, right? You get a lot of the he said, it's a he said, she said issue. It does happen in academic writing and professional writing, and it would look like this. Okay, so one of the things that our course has been trying to teach you about reporting speech through the interview project is the responsibility that you have to the person whose speech you're reporting. And that's what this like kind of, broken telephone game is also maybe leading us towards. And this leads us to academic integrity and the citation triangle, which I think I made up a long time ago. I stole this from myself several years ago. So we have our speech report and our speech reporter. So this is us talking. And how that speech report's being received and the original speaker that we're citing, right? All kind of in a triangular relationship with us. We need to understand that this original speaker may be, in fact, the receiver of our speech report and could potentially get quite upset about the way that we have reported and framed their original speech. And this is why it's always useful when you're wondering, like, have I misrepresented this? Have I done a good enough job of citing this source? You want to imagine that this person who you're citing is reading it. And that will help you stay on the up and up, right? So this person is always drawing conclusions based on what you have said about how they, about what they said. Sorry, my formatting got all messed up. That's basically all this slide is telling you. So you need to make sure that this is, that you are taking the responsibility for the impressions this person is making about this person's speech, because you need to imagine that this person could also be one of these people over here. Sorry, one sec, let me do this. And they may not be so happy about it. So I've provided some guidelines there for making sure that you're citing with integrity. Okay, that's like the end of my deep dive on working with sources. Yeah, Jay, that's great. So you don't need citation for your script. So are you talking about the interview, Jay? Yeah. So yeah, so on the transcript that you're like providing on eClass, you don't need citation, just provide us the transcript. On your website, you will be, and let's look at this here. Let me show you why you don't need to cite on the website. One second, please. There we go. Okay, so you see this here. Here is our, what's it called? Interview. Here's our interview. So where is the citation happening? Where do you guys see the citation happening? Shelby, what do you mean by answer? Oh, in their answer. Oh, I get it. Sorry. Okay, yeah, sorry, I get it. Any other ideas? Yes, Bobby, the description of the person being interviewed, the title, the picture, see the interview intro summary, their little bio. Zena describes the situation in Ukraine. And then question answer, all of this citation up here will frame your whole interview. So you don't need to cite throughout this section because this makes it clear. And you can look at, remember I linked you to some professional interviews. published interviews. So look at that because they look like this. You don't need to say Xena at the end of each one of these things because all of this is doing that work. To this page. Here's the link to this page. And then the examples are on the website here, this page. I'll share that too. So if you go down, wait. I put them here, right, guys? Look at these examples. No. Oh, maybe I didn't. Okay, maybe they're on the schedule. I thought I shared these. Am I losing my mind here? Oh, thanks, Shelby. Week 11. Oh, yeah. Bobby, thank you. So under week 11, here are the example interviews to consider. Okay, Saya, on your website, do you do in-text any image or fact taken from a different source? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You should be doing in-text citation, and you should have a references page where all your references lists are. You can choose in-text, you can choose integral citation and parenthetical citation when they make sense to do that. Yeah, Shelby, I think it's a good idea because then that helps to uphold your commitment to, remember, oh my gosh, I should just open these in different tabs. Journalistic principles. So when you're talking about transparency here, so having an about me page, you'd be like, I'm Shelby Gray and I'm, a writer of and invested in advocate for X, Y, and Z, which will then share your sort of subject positioning in relation to what's happening. Think about if you if you were to, I mean, you can make it up if you'd like, but if you were to go to a website like this, in order to evaluate the material there, you would have to click on an about page to figure out what the website is, who's it by. And so that's what this is for. Jay, absolutely, you can publish both interviews, no problem. Yeah, you do not have to provide their pictures. If you want, you can provide other sorts of images like flags or symbols, whatever helps to convey kind of who they are, what they represent. You're welcome. Any other questions, you guys? Micah, that's an excellent question. So what you'll end up doing is, if we look again, is sort of taking their answers and thinking about what aspects of their answers are most relevant to, wait, is this under the interview? Yeah, so you don't have to include it all. Because as was it Michael shared with us, like these things can get quite long. So even 5 questions can lead to an hour-long discussion. So what you want to do is go through their answers, select the most relevant aspects of those answers for presentation. One sec, sorry. Sorry, kid interruption. Okay, so you'll want to be selective and not include absolutely everything. You'll want to make sure that you are doing that with what's it called? Like making sure that you aren't misrepresenting the thrust of their answer, but that you have found the point at which they kind of found their answer, because sometimes people will talk towards what they actually want to say, and then you'll pull that out and that's what you'll put on the website. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't know if the TAs have advice about representation, misrepresentation that can happen in that process. You can feel free to jump in or address that in tutorial. So Maria, the screenshots are absolutely okay for the e-class submission, but it would be better for you to copy the text and paste it into a Word document, because some of the TAs may use screen readers or accessibility devices, and the screenshots, the image files, aren't readable by screen readers. So if you can copy and paste the text of those emails into a document, I think that would be better. And then on your website, you can do the same thing, applying that rule of like kind of being selective and trying to pick out the most relevant aspects. Usually written interviews, people get to the point much more clearly because they've edited themselves already. So you'll have an easier time, Maria, with deciding what can go on your website than the others. Yeah, if you're Brenda's suggesting in the chat that you can check with the interviewee to check what they would like you to include. I'd recommend that the way that you go about doing that, and maybe Brenda, you can comment too, is actually go through the process of writing up the interview on your website, share the website with them and say, are you happy with this representation of our interview? And get their feedback that way. Otherwise, if you just email them and say, what would you like me to include? They might be like, well, I already gave you the interview. What are you talking about? Yeah. Thanks, Brenda. Have I exhausted your? No problem, Bobby. We're just checking what we'll be using those transcripts that are provided on eClass for is we're going to see that the interview A was conducted, and B, we're going to just compare them to the representation on your website of the interview to make sure that, in our opinion, there isn't misrepresentation going on, that you've picked out all the most like quotable quotes, we'll be looking for that kind of thing. Okay, have I exhausted all your questions? Yeah, that's a good idea, Bobby. Okay, well, it's time now to rest before tutorials begin. Tutorial 4 this afternoon will be running online because I've had a COVID exposure in the last few 24 hours, so I don't pass the screening test. So I will see everyone online, and thanks so much. Yeah, no problem, Shelby. Anytime you want to talk about citations, I'm your gal. You're welcome, Maria. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Oh, Nicole, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. I'll put a new link on right now. And hopefully, yeah, no glitch. I'll email you the link so you don't have to click on it from eClass. How about that, Nicole? Okay, bye everyone. Does anyone who's still here have any more questions? We're good. Okay. Bye.